Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Podcast Daily. It is Tuesday, and we are looking at Ohio State kickoff times. That's the point of the offseason that we are at. That's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. Appreciate him and Berm filling in for me at the end of last week. It turns out that there wasn't a ton going on, but some great episodes of the Daily without me, as they all are. They're much better when I'm not around.
That's not true.
But I'm going to try and upgrade the quality moving forward. And what better way than to get into it with one of, I think this generates maybe more passion than just about any topic related to Ohio State football when they play games, and the desire, I think, from most of the fan base, certainly not from the media, but to have more night kickoffs. And they've got one in November. I guess
sure do. Like mid-November too. It's not even early November, as some previous Ohio State November night games have been. There's a chance that this one gets a little chilly when they play Michigan State on it's November 11th, right? It'll be a 7:30 game, an NBC banger. I don't know. That probably will not be.
It's primetime on the cock.
Oh, sorry. No, that's not true. That's not on Peacock. Although they will definitely have a game on the cock. That's for certain. We can talk about that if we want to. But this one is on NBC proper. And I probably won't be their first NBC game. I think we all kind of believe that the Notre Dame game will be an NBC game, although the kickoff time for that has not been announced. And also there was an interesting development with that too, maybe that we should circle back to in a second. But okay. Night games in November. I think get used to them, because if you don't like them, they're going to happen. If you want more night games, it's an opportunity, I think, to get more night games. But if you were staunchly opposed to the November night affair, they're not going anywhere. And in fact, they are going to be, I think, coming back into your life in a major, major way.
I felt like Monday was almost like a warning shot. Be careful what you wish for. And that's not targeted at the fans that want night games. I understand that people love them, that the atmosphere is great, or can be different depending on the opponents. That's a conversation we've had many times in the past, and we don't have to have it again. But I know that there is an element of people that want more of them, and certainly the Big Ten as a whole did, which is why it made a $7 billion deal with NBC to expand the broadcast windows and the way that it can present the game. Well, this is going to be the downside. Is when you're playing football in the Midwest in mid to late November, the temperatures are not going to be very conducive for anybody there. And it's not going to be an ideal situation. So I think the fact that this was really one of the first release times that we had, Fox also, by the way, confirmed that they have the game at the end of November. So that's at noon as well, as it should be and will be. Those are some of the first ones that we've got for this game. But the fact that NBC was so quick to jump on this game, which is not loaded with national intrigue, unless you just like watching Mel Tucker steal money on national television. Like, this isn't the game that you look at the schedule and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's gotta be at primetime.
Yeah, it's the heist movie. It's the NBC movie of the week. Watch Mel Tucker steal $10 million as his team gets steamrolled 63-3 in Ohio Stadium. Yeah, would not have been my first selection if I were NBC. Well, at least it would not have been the one that I would use to whet the appetite. And I guess I think they previously announced that Penn State, West Virginia in the first week of the year is going to be an NBC night game as well. That is, I think, a little bit better potentially than Ohio State and Michigan State is going to be, because those have been absolute bloodbaths, particularly in Ohio Stadium, since that 2015 game. And I don't have any reason to believe that this year will be any different. So it's not the marquee matchup I think that you want there. But I do think it's like we can make fun of that game, I guess, and it's fun, and we will now and when the game comes up, we'll make fun of it. But it is indicative, I think, of how much is changing with Ohio State schedules moving forward. I mean, it's true for all the Big Ten, but we're an Ohio State show, so we'll talk about Ohio State. More night games, different channels, potentially a different thought process for opponents moving forward too. With some of the news that dropped last week with Ohio State adding some non-conference games, it is changing. I don't say that to say that it's changing for the worse or the better. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But it's going to be different. And this is just one of the many ways that it's going to be different.
Yeah, I think it just stands out that they make this move so far in advance. It's not like, you know, we're going to flex a game into primetime because it's so massive. It's 2 top 10 teams. You reserve the right to do so. You're going to use a 6-day window or something like that. NBC and the Big Ten making this announcement in the middle of May, I think does serve as a reminder that there is going to be a different way that the league approaches business. And that's reflective. This is a league that generally, November as a whole, we know that it used to be that first week of November, that's going to be your cutoff. Then there's maybe some flexibility for the second week. Here's the timeline where it could be a primetime game. You look at it, if we remove 2020, Bill, from the equation, where like everyone was playing in front of empty stadiums and they were really just trying to maximize any eyeballs on that year, where there were, I think we counted 4 games in 2020 that were in primetime in November. Last year, it was just Michigan and Rutgers, a 7:30 kickoff. The year before that, it was Indiana and Michigan. Yeah, I don't know why. I'm just saying it happened. I didn't make that call. The same with this one, Indiana at Michigan in 2021. In 2019, another brace yourself for this one, Northwestern at Indiana, primetime banger. The year before that, Notre Dame at Northwestern. You can kind of understand that. And Ohio State, they have not played outside of the COVID year a November night game since a 2016 thriller with Nebraska. So that's sort of why I say that if it's not a warning, it's at least a hint of the direction that the Big Ten is going, where there's going to be more than one November night game in the Big Ten. That's just the direction that this is going. And I wonder if it's going to continue throughout the entire month, because you're trying to now satisfy, 3 heavily invested broadcast partners, and you are trying to expand your broadcast inventory and the attention on your programs. And like, it's going to be easier when some of these games are played on the West Coast, but that's only 2 potential hosts of those games.
Yeah, and also that won't happen until 2024. So in the meantime, they're going to have to put more probably Eastern time zone, Central time zone teams in those slots to I think get people used to the idea of games being in those slots on NBC and also on CBS. Like CBS eventually will replace its 3:30 SEC window with a 3:30 Big Ten game, and I think that could potentially have some marquee names in it. That's the weird thing about all this. Like the television package is changing, and they're bringing in these new partners, and like the games are going to be on different channels, but like Fox still now like gets the first pick of all the best games. So like CBS and NBC are in this, but I don't know how often they're going to get the best Big Ten games, or if they're ever going to get the best Big Ten games. So there can be some lean pickings, I think, for both of those networks, but nonetheless they'll have games in those windows. And like CBS announced that the September 23rd game, which is the week that Ohio State is playing at Notre Dame, Penn State and Iowa will be 8 p.m. kickoff on CBS. So like CBS is clearly interested in having primetime kicks of its own, which I think might present another opportunity for the Big Ten to have November night games, which Ohio State could be involved in. I think by and large, those kind of primetime Big Ten games might be the Ohio States versus Michigan States, and probably rarely, if ever, be like the Ohio State-Penn State game. Certainly won't be Ohio State-Michigan. I don't know if it'll be Penn State-Michigan either. I think that every iteration of Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan moving forward is very likely to be in that noon slot, regardless of where the game is played. But that doesn't mean that Ohio State is going to be any less of a hot ticket for like an 8 p.m. November game. I think like you'll see, unfortunately, like a lot of like Ohio State, Maryland in November at night, which I don't think anybody is particularly interested in.
Wonderful.
But I think it will happen. But the thing that I mentioned earlier, Austin, I'm curious what you might think of this. So if Iowa Penn State on September 23rd is a night game on CBS, does that mean that Ohio State Notre Dame is not going to be a night game? I know we think it'll be on NBC on a different network, but they wouldn't put those 2 games up against each other, would they?
I don't know why the Big Ten would want to do that. I don't know why, if NBC, CBS, and Fox are going to be in this together for the good of the Big Ten and themselves, which is ultimately what's going to drive all of these decisions, is their bottom line financially. You wouldn't want those 2 quote unquote properties going head to head at the same time. That's a pretty important game for the Big Ten that we're talking about on the other side. And Notre Dame, Ohio State, with the 2 largest, essentially, brand names in the sport going head to head in a non-conference matchup, is always going to get the maximum amount of eyeballs. So why, unless you have something clever planned for NBC, or you think that 3:30 is a great window for that. I don't really know what they're thinking. That announcement did make me think that it was probably not going to be destined for primetime for Ohio State, which is surprising to me. I think that's what everybody would have wanted, even though we don't like night games, or I guess I won't speak for you directly, Bill. I don't like covering them. I don't think that they're the ideal situation for maximizing our opportunities. You expect a game like that to be at night, and that it has a different feel and a different energy to it. I am kind of surprised if it won't be. I don't know that it will or won't. We're kind of guessing on that part, but the same thing is true for week 1 with what you were talking about with Penn State and West Virginia. You're not going to put Ohio State and Indiana, which is a marquee conference piece of inventory, and go head to head on the opening weekend if you don't have to. So there do seem to be some interesting pieces falling into place where maybe with the 3 broadcast partners all investing so significantly in the Big Ten, that maybe they're not going to be as tied to this has to be the one marquee window, which was clearly Big Noon Kickoff over the last handful of years. That may not be the case. They may just want each of them to be able to stand on their own and carve out unique windows so that they can compete against the rest of college football. I don't know, but it seems like that might be the case moving forward.
Yeah, I'm curious to see maybe if they get creative with it at all, especially with the Ohio State Notre Dame game. Like if they, I don't know, I didn't look at the rest of the schedule. I just know that the Penn State and Iowa also play that day. But if they wanted to do like and I think maybe Notre Dame has done this in the past on NBC, play at like 6 and have like a weird kickoff time, like a direct lead in to Penn State, Iowa. I guess that would have to be more like 5 o'clock for an 8 o'clock Penn State Iowa game. So maybe they'll do something like that. I think maybe NBC has done that before. It just creates a scenario where that I hope doesn't come to fruition, but I'm a little maybe nervous about, where like all of Ohio State's biggest, most important games are at noon, and then they stick Ohio State at night for like all the games that they're going to win by 50, because even Ohio State winning by 50 at 8 o'clock is still a valuable piece of content for those kind of networks. And it would just make, I think, for not a tremendous season-long viewing experience. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into that too much, but I love the primetime helmet games, and I know a lot of people do. And I was thankful that we got one against Notre Dame in Ohio State in Ohio Stadium last year. And I don't know, like if Ohio State Notre Dame is not one this year, and then like the game is not, and I would guess that Penn State Ohio State in the shoe is going to be big noon, then it's like, I don't know. But then you're like hold out hope for like Wisconsin, I guess. But I think Ohio State is going to play a handful of night games this year. I think that much is evident based off of some of the decisions we think that these networks are going to make. But I'm fearful that like none of the big games will be in those windows, which was kind of stink.
Yeah, that's what I told you as soon as it came out. We were talking about it earlier on Monday. I was like, well, this certainly makes me think that Ohio State's going to play 9 night games. If you're gonna announce in May that Michigan State is a 7:30 kickoff in November, well, all the rest of them have to fall there, don't they? I mean, except for the big ones, and that's a bizarre setup. I just, if this is where it's going, fine. There's nothing that I can do about it, and we'll adjust, and we'll still cover the games to the best of our ability whenever they are. But I agree with what you're saying. Like, if the rest of the schedule is at night, that's not what people are asking for. Like right. They felt like, it seems to me, I'm going to project a little, that Ohio State fans were frustrated. They weren't getting more opportunities like Penn State at night. And they were, looking at it and counting up the number of whiteouts where they had to go on the road and play under the lights in Beaver Stadium. Like, well, why doesn't Ohio State get that for their big games? And as you mentioned, they did last year for Notre Dame, and that was awesome. But I think maybe that's been Ohio State fans' biggest frustrations. Like, why, when we want to play night games, do you force it to be Rutgers and Maryland? And there's going to be more of that. Like that seems like where those games are going to have to go, because Ohio State draws such a massive audience all by itself, regardless of who it plays, that the podcast partners look at that and they say, well, yeah, Michigan State does kind of suck, but it doesn't matter because Ohio State is there.
Right. Yeah. So the other team doesn't matter in those games. It's all Ohio State eyeballs, or 95% Ohio State eyeballs in most cases. And we're not even talking about like BTN, which is going to want to do some night games, and like FS1 will probably want some night inventory as well. I do. It's kind of weird. Like I honestly think we could be staring at a situation where it's like Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan are daytime kickoffs, and the rest of the schedule is all in prime time, including like Youngstown State. Probably not Youngstown State, but
maybe
Western Kentucky. Because the other part of it, I was looking up of like who gets what and like what cut. So on Peacock, on the streaming only platform, there's gonna be 8 games, 8 Big Ten games all year, 4 non-conference and 4 conference games. Like I would feel comfortable betting a sizable amount of money that like Ohio State, Western Kentucky is going to end up on Peacock.
How many units?
A lot of units. Maybe as many units as I have available. It just feels like the kind of game that like they would want to put there because, again, you get all the Ohio State eyeballs. Like Western Kentucky is not a terrible offensive team. Like they might actually be kind of an entertaining game, even if it ends up being a blowout. And like Ohio State is like they're going to put Ohio State on Peacock. Like right, like I would be shocked if that doesn't happen once this year.
If you're NBC and you make this massive investment, primarily it is because you want to air Ohio State football games on your networks and streaming services. And you have to start telling them to find that and that they want it. If you don't already subscribe to the Cock, you're going to have to get it because otherwise you're missing the Western Kentucky game.
Yeah. And you can also watch wrestling too, which is great.
That's right. They've really done a great job on the Cock with bringing in some enjoyable inventory.
They have.
Premium live events, as they're known.
That's right. That's what when college football starts calling games premium live events, I think that will be when I stop covering college football. But that's what wrestling calls them. So we'll go with that for now.
You don't think Ohio State, Western Kentucky is a premium live event?
I sure don't. No, I do not.
They can't all be WrestleMania, Bill. Sometimes you have to have Backlash.
Yeah, but Backlash was awesome.
True.
I don't know. I don't think that reaches Backlash levels either. Maybe like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've just recently gotten back into wrestling. I don't know what the crappy pay-per-views are or premium live events, are, but that's what Ohio State, Western Kentucky would be. Speaking of Ohio State, Western Kentucky, I want your thoughts on what Ohio State announced last week while you were adding up the steps walking around Disney World with Nevada and Charlotte getting added to the schedule in 2029. What were the other ones? I have them written down here. Marshall game got moved in 2024, and I thought there was another one. Maybe that was just it. But anyway, they're adding more group of 5 kind of teams to the long-term schedules here. What do you make of that?
I don't think that I love it. I certainly understand it. I think that it was a fun stretch for a couple of years where Ohio State was like, here's the new way of the world. We're going to be really aggressive. We're going to add home and homes with Georgia. We're going to pursue home and homes with Alabama. We're going to add Notre Dame, Texas, Washington, like all those big time games because it's good. It's good for the sport. It's good for Ohio State. They make a lot of money. You want to engage your home crowd. You want people to come hang out throughout the whole year. And then it's like, well, there's not great, tremendous downside. You want to have strength of schedule to get in the playoff. And then the selection committee never adjusted. Mm-hmm. And they just kept focusing solely on your win-loss record. And it never really got to that point where sort of college basketball obviously plays more games. It's not the exact same, but like losing a big-time non-conference game doesn't hurt you. In fact, sometimes it winds up helping set your resume apart just that you're willing to play them. And that has never happened for college football. So, like, I can't see why Gene Smith would have to sit there and say, let's keep doing it and just hope eventually that the selection committee changes, which it won't. And it has less incentive to even do so now when you're moving forward into expanded playoff fields. So this is an unfortunate symptom of a lot of what's been going on. We talked about the playoff format a week ago and when those games are going to be played. As you add more conference games, and I think that this is another tea leaf reading moment. Like, I would think that the Big Ten wants to eventually get to 10 conference games. Mm-hmm. You almost have to do that when you're getting to 16 and adding USC and UCLA and the potential for more. So I'm a little bit skeptical for the ones is like 5 or 6 years from now that they will be played. I think there's more change coming to college football schedules. If they do get played, like, who cares? No one's ever going to get excited about them.
So that was like my next question. So this year it's Youngstown State, it's Western Kentucky, it's Notre Dame. You still get one of those games. Next year it's Southern Miss, Western Michigan, and Marshall. And then 2025 is when you're supposed to get the next one of those marquee games. It's Texas. So it's 2 years down the road. Do you think it happens? Like right now, as we sit here, do you think that like that matchup will happen as it's planned out, which is Ohio State hosting Texas in 25 and Ohio State at Texas in 2026?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I want it to. I think those games are great for everybody. They should be played. Will the Big Ten format allow for it? Will the college football playoff expansion require it? Probably not. And Texas, their situation is a little bit different than when this was agreed to. Going to the SEC, the Big Ten is going to look vastly different than when Ohio State signed up for that game with USC and UCLA. And both sides may look at this and say, it doesn't quite fit the profile of what needs to be in that spot anymore. And that stinks. I don't know if you have any more actual reporting insight on that. I don't at this point to suggest that that's likely to be the case. But if I were putting units down, I wouldn't expect that game to be played anymore.
Yeah, no, I don't have any reporting on it. Just that's where like all this kind of led me to is the wonder whether or not that series, the Alabama series, the Georgia series, end up happening. And I think I don't know. If they don't happen as scheduled, maybe it could be like what they did with the TCU series a few years ago and like make it a one-off neutral site game, which is like almost worse than than not playing it at all on some level. Because I think if you're not going to play these games on campuses, then whatever, just play Ball State and get it over with. But I am inclined to believe that Ohio State's future schedules are going to change in some capacity because you figure they're going to play one of USC or UCLA every year now moving forward, and maybe both in some years. So you probably don't need it. I don't know if it hurts you all that much in a world where there's 12 playoff spots in your Ohio State and you can probably lose 2 games every year and still get in. But I don't know if you want to leave that to chance either when it doesn't really matter. So I think we'll probably see some more movement on that in the coming years. Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts about night kickoffs and future scheduling for Ohio State?
No, invest in hand warmers if you're a person who likes to go to Ohio State, because I think you're going to be going to some chilly ones. Although it is hard to predict the weather sometimes in November in Ohio. Those could be like 75-degree kickoffs for all I know.
That's like, too bad we just didn't have Brim Cantori on here to give us his early look at what it's going to be like on November 11th.
I'm sure he's already concerned about it raining that day.
I think he's probably projecting a blizzard already and preparing accordingly. That's Absolutely. His favorite thing. But at least he's prepared. We tease, but it's because we love.
That's the thing, though. Like he worries so much about it, but then sometimes I feel like he still shows up unprepared. He's like, "Oh, I forgot my rain jacket." It's like you've been talking about it raining all week, and then you didn't pack your rain jacket. What are we doing?
I don't have gloves at Spartan Stadium. All right, well, we'll scoop up your fingers when we leave. Boy, that's good stuff. Okay, I'm back. I did the best I could. I hope you enjoyed the podcast daily for your Tuesday. A look at scheduling stuff, and so that you can start planning for now and into the future. Changes are coming to the Big Ten and for Ohio State in that regard. Got a lot more coverage planned throughout the week. Bill's been going through with his state of the positions previews or analysis. I'm not sure how would you call them, Bill? What are we calling those?
Both. They are analysis. They are analysis of the present and a preview of the future.
Love that. Okay, perfect. Those are at ohiostate.rivals.com, and we will talk about those, of course, as we roll along here. Already into the middle of May. The offseason is churning right along, baby. We're going to get to the finish line hopefully as soon as possible. Thanks again to Bill and Byrne for filling in for the last couple of days, and thanks to Bill for his insight and analysis, as always, this morning on the podcast daily or whenever you listen. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later.